Welcome to The Last Bet, the podcast where we have honest conversations about gambling addiction, recovery, and what it really takes to rebuild your life. I'm your host, Ryan Stewart. Whether you're struggling yourself, supporting someone you love, or just looking to better understand this addiction, you're in the right place. Here, you'll find real stories, practical tools, and hope from people who've been there. Because recovery isn't about your next bet, it's about making your last one. Welcome to The Last Bet. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Last Bet. I'm Ryan Stewart. This is a podcast about gambling addiction, recovery, and the shit nobody wants to talk about until it's already become a problem. I do want to remind everybody before we get started with today's show to please like, subscribe, review, please share the podcast. We're available on every single platform out there. You can find the show or share it through our website, safpodcast.com. That's safpodcast.com. We also have our weekly gambling addiction meeting every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Just go through the website again, safpodcast.com, and you can register for that to get the Zoom link. So today, we're going to talk about something that I think we're going to hear like probably a hell of a lot more about, which is prediction markets. You may have heard names like Kalshi or Polymarket. These platforms allow people to put money behind predictions about real world events. And there's a huge debate happening over where prediction markets end and gambling begins. I'm not here to settle the legal argument. I'm much more interested in another question, like, what happens when somebody with a gambling problem starts participating in something that feels, almost exactly like gambling, but is presented to them as trading? Because I know how my brain worked when I was gambling. And if you're anything like me, sometimes all your addiction needs is the loophole. So let's talk about the loophole. This is one of the things I think people misunderstand about recovery. You can stop doing one specific behavior without actually changing the pattern behind it. You can say, I don't go to casinos anymore. Great. I deleted my sports book. Great. I don't bet on football anymore. Fucking fantastic. But what happens when something else shows up that scratches that exact same itch? Because my concern isn't necessarily what somebody calls the activity. I'm looking at what it's doing to you. Are you thinking, about it constantly? Are you checking your phone all day? Are you putting more money in after a loss? Are you telling yourself, you're smarter than everyone else? Are you convinced you've found an edge? Are you trying to make money back from, the money you lost yesterday? Are you hiding how much money you're putting into it? Are you getting that same rush when you win? And are you getting the same sick feeling every fucking time you lose? Those questions matter a hell of a lot more to me than what category an app falls under, because addiction is really good at negotiating. It says, this is different. This isn't technically gambling. I'm investing. I'm trading. I've researched this. I know sports. I understand politics. I know what's going to happen. Sound familiar? Because it should. Now let's talk about the illusion of being smarter. This is where prediction markets become especially interesting to me. They can make risk-taking feel intellectual. Think about sports betting, right? How many times have you heard someone say, I know football. I watch every damn game. I know this team. I've studied the stats, right? I know this matchup. I've seen it a million times. I did versions of that myself. Knowledge makes you feel like you have control. And, that's dangerous because knowing more about something doesn't mean you control the outcome. The same thing can happen when you're predicting politics, economics, or current events. You read 10 articles, you watch the news, you follow people online, you look at the numbers. Now suddenly putting, $500 on an outcome doesn't feel like gambling. It feels like you're making an informed decision. And, maybe you are making an informed prediction. But an informed prediction is still a prediction. There is still uncertainty. That's the entire reason somebody is willing to take the other side. And this is where I think people in gambling recovery need to be extremely careful, because the addiction doesn't have to tell you go gambling. Yeah, that's too obvious. Instead, it can tell you you're good at this. You understand this. This is different. That's a much easier story to believe, right? Your brain doesn't care about the label. This is probably the biggest point I want people to take away from this episode. The legal definition matters to regulators. The financial definition matters to markets. The terminology matters to companies. But when you're talking about addiction, behavior matters. What happens when you participate? What happens emotionally? What happens financially? What happens when you lose? Can you walk away? That's the question. Because if I put $100 into something and lose it, what happens next? Do I say, well, I was wrong, and I move on? Or does something switch on? Now I'm pissed. Now I need another opportunity. Now I need $200. Because if I can just get this next one, right, I can get my $100 back. There's the trap. We talked about chasing losses before on this podcast. The packaging can change. The cycle doesn't have to. Risk, anticipation, outcome, win, loss, repeat. And when somebody is vulnerable to compulsive gambling behavior, anything built around that cycle deserves scrutiny. Gambling is becoming frictionless. And here's the bigger issue. Gambling used to require effort. Think about what somebody had to do years ago. You might have had to physically go to a casino, find a bookmaker, get cash, place the bet. There was friction between you and the action. Today, pull your phone out. That's it. Your casino can be sitting in your pocket while you're lying in bed. And, now you're moving beyond traditional gambling. Sports books, casino apps, daily fantasy, prediction markets, trading platforms, whatever comes next. The lines are becoming increasingly blurry. And from a recovery perspective, that matters. Because when I stopped gambling, I couldn't just learn how to stay away from one particular app. I had to understand what I was actually chasing. Was it money? Was it excitement? Was it an escape? Was it control? Was it a rush? Was it the opportunity to undo a loss? For me, gambling wasn't ultimately about picking winners. It was about what gambling did to my brain and how it made me feel. That's why recovery has to go deeper than just deleting an app. You have to recognize the pattern. 100%. So here's the test I would give anybody listening to this. Forget what the activity is called for a second. Ask yourself, what happens to me when I do it? Can I set a limit and actually stick to it? Can I lose money without immediately wanting another opportunity? Do I find myself thinking, about it when I'm supposed to be working, when I'm with my wife, when I'm with my kids, when I'm trying to sleep? Am I checking my phone constantly? Am I hiding transactions? Am I moving money around so somebody doesn't see it? Am I increasing the amount because the smaller amounts don't give me the same feeling anymore? Do I tell myself I'm going to stop after I get back to even? And here's the big one. If I couldn't put money on it, would I still care this much about the income? Sit with that one. Because that question can tell you a lot. If you're watching a random basketball game between two teams you don't give a shit about, and you're sweating every possession because you've got money riding on what, probably not watching because you suddenly became a basketball fan, the money changed the experience. So whether you're talking about a sports book, casino, prediction market, or whatever comes next, pay attention to what the behavior does for you. Remember, your recovery doesn't need technicality. One of the things I learned since May 20th of 23 is that I don't need to win an argument with myself anymore. I don't need to prove something technically counts or gambling before deciding be good for me. That's freedom. Because addiction loves technicalities. Recovery doesn't need them. If something, starts activating the same behaviors that destroyed my peace before, I don't need a judge or a company what, category belongs in. This isn't good for me. That's enough. And maybe you're listening to this or, you've stopped sports betting, but you found yourself moving into something else, crypto, options, day trading, prediction markets, fantasy sports, whatever it is. I'm not telling you that every person participating in those things has a gambling addiction. It's not true. I'm telling you to look at your behavior because the question isn't, does everybody have a problem with this? The question is, what does this do to me? That's the question recovery requires you to answer honestly. Gambling is going to continue to evolve and technology is going to get better. The apps are going to get faster. The products are going to get more sophisticated and the language around them is probably going to get more sophisticated too. But recovery doesn't have to be complicated. Know your patterns, know your triggers, know the lies you used to tell yourself and recognize them when they show up wearing different clothes. Because your last bet doesn't necessarily start with saying, I'll never walk into a casino again. Your last bet happens when you finally understand what you are actually chasing and you decide you don't need to chase it anymore. That's the work, and that's what we're doing here. I'm Ryan Stewart, and this is The Last Bet. If you like this episode, please share the episode. Please write, like, subscribe, and review. Don't forget to go check out our website, safpodcast.com, where you can find out more information, resources, and also please do not forget to check out our Wednesday night meetings, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can get the link right there on the website. Remember, guys, the biggest win isn't hitting the next bet. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to The Last Bet. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, like, subscribe, and review. Also, share it with someone who needs it. For more episodes and recovery resources, visit safpodcast.com. That is safpodcast.com. Until next time, remember, your last bet could be the first day of your new life.